think we're live now.
Oh.
Now we're live.
Okay.
Is your camera working? Okay, good.
So much brighter than I am.
Yeah.
Because your spirit's so bright.
Alright, it's been a while since we did one of these. How's your phone on battery?
It's at like 10%.
I guess I could put my phone here.
It's at 18%. Aww. Damn, what's going on with my bun? It's so, like, long. Alright.
Okay.
Alright.
Alright. We're live.
Okay.
It's been a while since we did one of these.
Yeah. Hi, boo.
Hi, boo. It's hot in here. It's been a while since I set up the live stream, so
Yeah.
I was, like, stressing out and had a bunch of stuff to refigure out, and also because I'm using my computer now. Uh-oh.
Damn, your voice is so buttery. You're using your PC now?
At least we know that the audio is working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using my PC now, and I have everything with all these wires plugged into it, coming out of it.
Studio's pretty legit.
And I was getting some technical difficulties. In some ways, I prefer using my MacBook to do this, but
What made you make the switch from
I don't know.
testing things out?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted like a dedicated machine that just did all of my video, live streaming stuff. I've been using it for work now to do my video calls and everything. That way I don't have to use my MacBook, which I do all of my design work on, and then have to also use that computer to like do my video calls, so I could keep them separate.
They can't see.
Huh?
They can't see. I'm trying to hold his hand, but he's like
They
embarrassed.
could hear the creaking of this table.
Alright, okay, I won't touch the table. Alright! We'll maintain a respectable distance.
Alright, so
Alright, what's our warm up?
what should we do to...
It's been so long, I'm like awkward.
Yeah. So before we get into it, I don't know. Do you have any question? We should have like wrote a list of questions.
A list of questions
Or we should have asked people for
like
generic
pre-questions. Does anybody want to ask us questions so that we can warm up and be less awkward? What is one new thing that you are excited to like try next year? So awkward.
Oh man. This is what we're going to talk about in the second half of this? Or we'll talk about it now?
Whatever.
2021. I
Could be like a new toy technology, not like
a
toy.
new skill.
A new skill.
I mean, I have been curious about like making beats.
Yeah? Okay.
I don't know.
Like intro, like YouTube intro beats, or like
Not like a full
like Timbaland beats.
fully
or
produced
like,
song or something,
Yeah.
but like no, I mean, so since I've been making videos, I've been using music. I think I was talking with you about this the other day, that I like subscribe to a service where I could basically any track that's on the service I could use in my YouTube videos.
Yeah.
But it's a commonly used service, so when I'm watching like other people's YouTube videos and then I like hear the same song that like, and it happens pretty often because there's so many people using it and there's only so many songs that are on the platform. I'm just like, oh man, that's like the song that I used in my video. And I'd like to have like original songs.
I mean, you have that pad where you can.
Yeah, so that pad is that it's meant, I mean, I bought it to use for the live streams. I'm not using it now because I don't have a wire that's long enough to reach to my computer, but that's actually made to like make beats or like as a replacement for a keyboard. I don't know. I feel like it's a whole nother discipline that's like a big undertaking to learn. But I thought it might be fun to like, if I was like making YouTube videos, if I could like make a couple beats that would be like the background music for some of the things there. But the other thing, as you may have seen earlier today, I've been navigating Fiverr And you could actually just like pay music producers to just send you some beats, and some of them it'll be exclusive to you, and some of them do it for as low as like $15-20.
You've never used Fiverr before. I feel like you're the one that recommended Fiverr to me once.
Yeah, I mean, so this weekend I just started using it. I had just I needed copywriting because I'm like building the website for As Required. And I was like I was like thinking about writing up an about section. I started writing it up, and I was just like getting frustrated because I wouldn't say that writing is like my strong area, that I could just like write a paragraph out and like be happy with it. So I was like sitting there for like an hour trying to write like what is As Required about, and like I know the bullet points, but putting it in a paragraph or like in a story is not.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that would take a lot of time. So I went onto Fiverr just to like see like copywriters or whatever, just, hey, here's a bunch of bullet points. Can you like write 200 words or like a bunch of paragraphs of like incorporating all of these bullet points into it? That way I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I found like a lot of people like that's exactly like what they offer on their like page. It's like, here, I'll write your about me section. And yeah, so I hired a guy to write my about me section. I like wrote up all the bullet points of like what I wanted to capture in the paragraph. And we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I've heard a lot of stories. Like there's been some like nightmare stories where they ask for like one thing and they get something completely different. But I think it's
like low risk, low cost.
Yeah,
it's like $15.
I mean, it's only like $15,
yeah.
And a big part of it too. Like I think a big part of getting what you're looking for is like in the brief. So if you write a pretty descriptive brief, like explaining exactly what you want, then I think there shouldn't be any surprises. So we'll see.
Awesome.
And then I also started like looking around there. I was like, oh, what if I like offered stuff on Fiverr? Because like I was looking in the graphic design section and it's like kind of not that great, but I guess also because people are only asking for like $5.
Yeah, it's like $5 worth of time, yeah.
But there's also some people there that are like pro verified that like charge upwards of like $100 per project. I mean, you could charge whatever you want.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be interesting as like an experiment to be like, oh, what if I like offered very specific things in Fiverr? Like, could I make some money on it?
Okay. Interesting. So making beats and Fiverr.
I don't think it would be well,
exploring.
I mean, I'd rather just do it straight off of my own website, have people buy off of that, but there's just so many people. Thing is, like, when I was looking for a copywriter, I was like, I know exactly what I'm looking for, I just don't know where to go to, like, find those people.
Yeah.
So, like, Fiverr was the thing that came up. I still don't know. Like, if I were to look for a copywriter, I don't know what website, aside from just randomly typing in Google, copywriter, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know where I would find that. So I guess Fiverr was, like, the first place that I would go to look for something like that.
That's interesting that there isn't, like a Googleable... Like
I'm sure there might be if you're, like, in the industry.
Yeah.
But this is, like, the first time I've ever found myself, like, looking for a copywriter.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So your things that you're excited to try are making beats and Fiverr.
Well, so I don't know if we're going to talk about this later in the live stream in terms of our like 2021 goals.
Let's just jump right into it.
Okay, I guess we could warm up with our 2021 goals.
Yeah.
My big 2021 goal, I've been thinking about this already for a couple months, was to like actually start trying to make money with As Required.
Okay.
So if you don't know, As Required is my design studio.
Yeah.
And I like made it an LLC over a year ago already, and like I haven't made a single dollar of income on it. I've just like, I've rented out the studio, I've like built it out to produce a lot of stuff, and now I'm at this point of like, all right, now I'm all set up to produce a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Now how do I like make money? Like I made it an LLC because I was planning on making money with it. So now 2021 will be like, all right, what are the actual things that I'm going to start making money on with As Required? And I have a bunch of ideas already, but like I'm already like getting the wheels turning on some of that stuff now. And once January 1st hits, it's going to be like foot on the gas pedal. Like, all right, start putting stuff out there, start selling stuff.
Yeah.
And start trying to make money for the business.
Can we go a little bit backwards and be like, Because I know that there's folks who like know who you are and don't really know about like as required as like a thing. Am I really far from my mic?
Yeah, you are kind of. But I think it'll still pick
fine.
you up.
I just don't want the creaking of the table. So I know that there's folks who like know who you are but don't know a lot about as required. So like, and I know that your like priorities for as required shift, but like, what is it? What does the name mean? What's the logo mean? Because your logo's everywhere.
Oh God, that's really deep.
Okay, all right. Is that too early?
No,
too soon?
I mean, I could give the overall. So I've always had this as required thing, and I didn't know really what it was. It was just kind of like a brand, and I just started putting the name like on everything. So. I have Christmas, like, so I give a Christmas gift where I make t-shirts and I put the logo and the name everywhere, and then everybody asks me like, oh, if people ask me like what is as required, what should I tell them?
Yeah.
And
it's all
at first
over your
I
laptop, it's on my bike.
Yeah, at first I didn't really know, but now I'm just kind of landing on like it's my design studio.
Yeah.
So anything that I produce here, like it gets the as required brand on it. So that's what it is. It's just my design studio. It's if I did have like an agency that like made stuff, like it would, that's the name of it would be as required.
What does as required mean? Nah.
So this is a long story. This is like something else that I would hire a copywriter to do as well, to write up as well. But the main idea is, so as required comes from math. When you get up to higher levels of math, once you pass calculus, pass whatever, like all the stuff where you're like using numbers to solve problems.
By the way, I like spent my whole life avoiding math because I was like an artist, and then I ended up dating a math guy. But anyway, continue, go on.
So in math, when you reach the higher levels, that's above just like solving equations and stuff like that. You have to do, it's basically, it turns into like all writing. It's all proofs.
It's like philosophy, right?
Yeah. Do you know what a proof is?
Yeah.
So
no, I don't.
So in higher level mathematics, you start doing proofs, which is like, hey, why does 2 plus 2, like, why is it that 2 plus 2 equals 4? I don't know. And then you end up going into this whole thing where you like write out like using axioms and theorems to prove like why this thing is the way it is. So anyway, you don't need to know what a proof is, but you just need to know that whenever you complete a proof and you like prove the thing that you're trying to prove, there's a couple things you like end it with. There's QED. It's like the Latin thing. I can't even pronounce it. It's like quod et demonstratum or something. But like the English non-Latin version of that is as required. So it's like, so I prove this thing as required. It always goes at the end of a proof.
Yeah.
So once you've like set out to like solve this problem and then prove that it's true once you've proved that it's true at the very end, you write as required. And a very shorthand way of doing that is by drawing a square. The square is called halmos, or another word for it is a tombstone, which is a little grim.
Yeah.
But that's the name of the square character that you write, and it also means as required, or it means QED. They all mean the same thing.
Okay.
Same thing. So that's kind of where the logo is based off of. It's a square or a tombstone.
A tombstone.
And just thinking about the square being called a tombstone, I thought that was like really grim, so I just put like a little sun in there.
I wish I had something that like shows your logo.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't have like a shirt or anything here that shows the logo. So my logo is like the square, which is the tombstone with like a little sun in it, just because it's a tombstone, but I think that's too grim, so I just put a sun inside of it.
Cool. It's cute.
So that's where the name comes from, and that's where the logo comes from. So like kind of philosophically, why I named it that thing at the end of a proof is because that term, like as required, or if you take that Latin phrase, the QED, it kind of is like one of those things. Like I think the Latin phrase literally translates to that which was to be demonstrated. And that's kind of like what my studio is. Like I'm like experimenting. I'm doing a lot of like stuff that I'm just like trying to demonstrate that, like,
to show that it works.
Not even to show that it works. It's just to try it out
Yeah.
and like to see if you could prove something, or like prove yourself. So I think just that idea that you're like setting out to prove something, that's kind of the embodiment of like what I'm trying to do with as required. I'm like, it's in a way like I'm trying to prove myself or trying to prove something, like I could do stuff, or like I could learn how to do a lot of stuff. That's kind of like what it is, or like where that word comes from, that which is to be demonstrated.
I think that like,
yeah,
and not to make this like all about as required or anything, but I think that's really one, I think it ties in really nicely to that the whole thing about exploration and like play that we wanted to talk about, but and like watching the way that you do stuff, and watching the way that like you do, like you're like, okay, I just want to try out this live stream, I just want to like try out this design, I want to try out this animation. Like a lot of the stuff that you do is very just like, I just want to try it out for the sake of trying it out, which is such like a different way that I approach creativity, which is just like, okay, I have this thing that I want to do and it needs to be perfect. And like, I know we talked about like I never finish a painting, because I have so much like hang up and around the need that it needs like the perfection, right? So I think like it's really, whenever we talk about creativity, I think it's interesting that we approach it in different ways, but that explains your company name a lot.
Yeah.
And like the way that you do stuff.
Yeah, that, and like what I'm trying to do here in the studio.
Yeah.
Is
like
just,
even this live stream, it's like,
yeah. Live streaming in general, like using the studio to live stream is like one of the many things that I'm experimenting with in the studio, or trying to demonstrate that I could do in the studio. And I have a lot of ideas of stuff that I'm going to be doing in the studio when it comes to like photography, or like creating design assets, or all that stuff. Yeah. And those are like, actually, now that to come full circle to like me finding a copywriter, those were kind of like a lot of the bullet points that were in the thing that were like, yeah, I want this, so there are two different things that I had the copywriter write, just about as required philosophically, and then the other thing is just about the studio as like a physical space, like it's 96 square feet, it's like built out to do photography, live streaming, blah blah blah. But yeah, like those, like the couple points that I wrote about philosophically about like what as required is it's exactly what you said, where it's like, it's my place to publish my like unfinished or like imperfect work. Yeah, like I feel like a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be doing here is going to be not polished, like not perfect. And while at some point in the future I do want to like take on client work, I think in the beginning all the stuff that I'm going to like put on my website is going to be the kind of like works in progress, or like unfinished stuff, just to like have a place to put it, instead of like tucking it away in a cabinet or something that, you know, a place where nobody will ever see it. Because I think there is value in, I don't think there's value, like, I mean, there is value, but like when people think that something needs to be finished before they could start sharing it, that's almost a thing that prevents people from even trying to do stuff.
Why are you yelling at me?
So if you could like break that barrier down of saying like, oh, this thing needs to be finished before I could like share it with the world, like that in a way prevents you from even starting doing stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been like, if I can summarize 2020, I mean, you know, 2020 was a lot of stuff, but like as far as my own personal journey around like entrepreneurship and creativity, 2020 was interesting because it was a lot of me coming back to creativity and like plugging back into the part of me that always wanted to express things in non-work related ways, right? Like I, you know, for those who don't know, I've been going to art school since I was like 11 until I was like 18, and then when I was 18 I like really dove into writing, and I was like a creative writer, and I was like all into just like I was really deeply into blogging for a while, and then I stopped, and then I just got like really scared about putting anything out there when I started wanting to do things again. Like the culture shifted, right? Like now if you want to publish anything, it needs to be perfect. If you want to have like a business Instagram, it needs to be like a polished business Instagram, because, you know, if you're in the public eye, there's a lot of critique and judging and shit that's going to go down, right? So if I don't have like the mental stamina to deal with that, I'm not going to make anything. But that's more like the public facing side of me, even in like my own private art thing, where it's like I do art mostly for myself. There's so much in my own way you know, even if it's, I want to be experimental, right? So like Korean calligraphy painting, that's something like every time I think about it, I get so excited about it. I have all the materials. I like took a class before COVID hit, and then I have all the opportunity to practice it by myself, but I can't even bring myself to like start. And it's also because a part of me knows that like Korean calligraphy painting, there's very little room for mistakes. So I'm like, well, I can't start because it needs to be perfect.
Yeah.
So then maybe my question, and I know that like we talked about this, I think in like a past live stream, where we went pretty deep about stuff, but like that whole thing about just getting past that perfection thing, is that something that you've always had? Like, is that like lack of needing things to be perfect something that you've always had, or is that something you have to like? Do you still grapple with it now?
No,
or
so
yeah.
When I think about it, it's something that like developed over time, and for a while I haven't like put a name to it.
Yeah.
Like I just started getting into this, like I felt like over 5 years ago. Like I felt like this is something that's been developing over 5+ years ago, where I try to like start stuff and then I like get frustrated when I'm like doing a lot of work on it, and then it's just like, oh, this is just not in a place that like I'm ready to just say like this is ready, this is this thing. But I've been like slowly trying to like break that wall down, or just saying like I should just keep doing shit, just do shit. It doesn't need to be like professional grade stuff. Like just keep doing stuff. And I became more about like, I care more about the act of like learning new things than like becoming the best at the thing. And I feel like over time I've just naturally been doing that, but I never put a name to like, oh, I'm a person who's okay publishing imperfect stuff, or like I'm a person who's okay doing a lot of like putting stuff out in the world that's like not polished or not perfect. I never like put that name to it. I've always been about like, I've just naturally just started doing that, and it's not until now where I realized like, I feel like I'm way more okay putting imperfect stuff out into the world than other people. Like, I'm finally now like saying that that's what I'm doing, where it's been this process of like 5+ years where I've been like slowly becoming okay with like putting stuff out there that's not perfect.
My I was talking about I've been talking about like imperfection and like my fears of not fears of perfection, but just like my beef with perfection a lot, with friends, with my therapist, and things like that. And one really interesting thing that came up, that apparently before my therapist became a therapist, she was an artist in the West Coast, and she was talking about how one of the like the mantras that she had to tell herself over and over and over again all the time as an artist was like, just shoot for mediocre. Like she had, otherwise she wouldn't make art. So like she would just like shoot for mediocre. And like the way that she described perfectionism is like, she was like, it's a really stern space and it's like super narrow, right? You either are or you're not. There's like no room in between for you to be like almost perfect or whatever. So it's a really mean place to be. And I think it was really interesting because like if anybody knew me in like high school and college, like I don't think perfectionism was anything that I not like necessarily cared about. I don't think I believed in it. I'd never like strived for it. But at some point in my adulthood, this whole thing about not wanting to fail, like failure had a different tone once I hit a certain age, that like I became a lot smaller than I thought that was possible. And I think like 2020 was there was so much experimentation for me on like what it meant to put my face out there, what it meant to like put content out there, what it meant to like talk to strangers or be on a panel. And I think every single time I take a step, I have like a small panic attack. But in terms of like creativity, in terms of creativity and writing, I think that's where I feel my biggest block, right? Like people are like, you should make art, like you should charge money, you should have commissions, right? I know so many people are already asking me, they want this, they want that. But I don't know why like my career is so much easier than like just art, like my passion, right? My skill set. I don't know.
But it's like, so when you talk about or you brought up the example about like, you know, businesses coming out with their like Instagram pages and stuff like that. The like metaphor that I think about, like, and especially when I think about creating like Instagram pages for like companies, it's like when you first create that Instagram page, you feel compelled to already have like 16 posts on there, like, before you start publicizing it, right? And you also start thinking about like, oh, every single post that I make from this Instagram account like has to be fire, like it has to be like an amazing picture, image, or whatever. But I don't think that's the way.
I'm just chatting with folks in the chat. Anyway,
you could acknowledge them verbally.
No,
hi, Sandy.
What? All right,
hi, Sandy.
fine. Hi, Sandy.
Thanks for tuning in. But anyway, like, I think the metaphor for that is like, say for example, you're creating an Instagram page for your business, like right off the bat, like nobody's expecting like your first 10 posts to be like bangers, like the best photo you've ever seen. Like, you know, it's going to be a process of like, all right, you're going to create the first few posts, and you know, a couple of them aren't going to be like perfect. They're not going to be like the most beautiful photo or the most beautifully designed graphic. But it's also a process of learning from like each
the
post.
Process.
Like every post that you make, like people are not going to like some of them, people are going to like some of them. And for each of those like first few posts, you're going to take the information from and the feedback that you get from them, and then you're going to constantly improve the thing. Like there's nothing to improve on if like you're trying to be perfect like from day one.
I remember us talking about this where you're like the end product doesn't even matter. I just publish it to publish it. Like by the time I'm done, I got what I needed out of it, which is like the data. You're like you learned about the process, and you learn what you have to do next time, and that's like enough. So what you put out there, like you don't actually care. Where I feel like for me, like, well, I think I stepped back from art at the end of high school, because for me what I learned was that like the end product is my goal. Like having a perfect end product is my goal, so I don't gain anything from the process. That, you know, so I think that's why I remember like staring out the window for a few moments when we were talking about that, because I'm just like, oh, that's really interesting. I never actually thought about the process being the goal. I feel like I only get interested in that when I have a new medium, when I'm like working with gouache instead of acrylic for the first time, when I'm like working with something I've never worked with before. So I don't know, I think as far as like personal motivation, it seems like your like very specific goal is to extract data about yourself, to learn
to learn or like get better.
What advice would you have for somebody whose like goal is the end product, like a perfect end product? That, you know,
if you're trying to create the perfect thing, then you're just kind of like working your entire life for that one thing. And then, all right, say for example, you did create the perfect thing. Like, what's next?
Another perfect thing. Because as an artist, like, I can only put out perfect things, you know?
You're never going to be perfect, though. And it's like, it's one of those questions, too. It's like when you're working, say for example, you're working on a project.
I'm going to move my chair up.
Like, how do you know, like, any, abstractly, like, any project, it could be anything, whether it's a painting or, like, working on a new, like, initiative for Back to Self. Like, how do you know you're done? Like, at the beginning, did you set some goals to say, like, hey, if I hit this, this, and this, then I'm done with this thing? Like, if I created a whole program, like a journaling program, like, I'm done when I get $1 million. Like, I don't know, like, what is... how do you know when, like, something's done?
And my friend Belinda was actually telling me this recently, where like there was a period of time where I was like live streaming myself painting, or I'd like put up like videos of my painting progress, and she was like, every single time I put up a video, she would think that painting was finished, but then I would come back and I would add more layers to it, and she's like, oh wow, now it's probably finished. And then there's a third video where she's like, oh wow, like, so I just kept building upon whatever the last piece was, and like at any given point it looked complete enough to be finished, right? But because I didn't feel like it was finished, I just kept getting into it and wouldn't know when to stop. you know? I think it's a little bit different for Back to Self because, like, I understand when things are monoliths, and I'm like, I love breaking things down into, like, Excel spreadsheets and frameworks and goals and stuff. So, like, with Back to Self, I'd probably have, like, a campaign and then break that down into, like, just, I have to sit down and ask myself questions about, like, what I want this to look like. I also feel like it's a little different because sometimes, like, those things just pour out of me. Like, I can just sit there and write a curriculum in, like, an hour and be like, oh, it's perfect, you know?
Yeah.
I don't have that same relationship with painting. I don't have that same relationship with, like, visual art for some reason. And I think I've always grappled with that, which is why after 7 years of art school, I was like, I'm not going to go to college for art.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to take commissions because I don't know if what I produce is good enough for me to put out there.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess it's a lot harder when you're working for yourself. Like, if you're doing work for a client, like, you know it's done when it, like, meets their specifications or their brief. But, like, if you're doing a painting for yourself, and it's also hard for, like, painting to know when something's done, because you could always, like, add another stroke to it. You could add, like, another layer of paint to it. But, like, when I think about graphics that I create, or if I'm, like, creating stuff for myself, or, like, a website for myself, like, I know when I'm done, when I'm just, like, sick of working on it. Or it's like, But, you know, I also like, saw this, too, when I was working at Gimlet. Like, because I saw a lot of people, like, producing podcasts, and, like, there was a lot of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor that, to me, was like, wow, that was, like,
beautiful,
a great episode. Like, I can't believe you're cutting that episode and you're not even gonna, like, publish that. And it was that there was, like, I don't know, like, we always had this, like, I think I learned this from, like, watching other people at Gimlet and, like, seeing a lot of stuff get, like, cut and, like, never seeing the light of day, that it was, like, I think the phrase is, like, it's better to be done than perfect, or better done than good. I don't know. But it's, like, I feel like it's better to move things to complete than it is to, like... I'd rather have a lot of things get moved to complete than to have, like, work towards one perfect thing. If that makes sense,
Thinking, like, inbox zero life, like...
Deshaun is asking a question. Do you feel like there has to be a routine to your creative process, or are you open to it being more abstract? Hi, Deshaun.
Hi, Deshaun.
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you have an answer for that?
So it's really interesting because, like, when I was going to school for writing, I think that's really when I heard about every single writer that I've ever that I think has, like, either written a book or was, like, a journalist or was published or whatever. Every single writer talked about how important it was to show up to work.
Yes.
So it's like, you know, it does, like, there would be writers out there who have, like, kids and, like, you know, like, full lives. So then what they would do is they'll wake up at 5 a.m. just to write. And, like, you know, a book that I recommend all the time, that was, like, that talked about writing as a practice, Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. Like, she really kind of broke down the process to be like, dude, if you, it doesn't matter if you, like, show up and all you do is, like, look at a blank piece of paper and then you write a line and you cross out a line and then you throw it out. At the end of your 2 hours, you still showed up to work. But the thing is like, you have to essentially, like, clear out the bullshit in order to get to the good stuff. And I know that there's people out there who do it differently, and I can't say that I've, like, followed that, and I don't know whether it'll be different if I did. Sorry, I'll pass it on to you, and then I'm gonna actually add a time where I did show up and it changed a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. So to answer his question in the way that I approach it, so the routine is exactly what you said. Like, the routine is... Creating a routine is to get you to show up, to do that thing.
Water ASMR.
That probably sounds pretty nice with the microphones. So, and I think Deshaun would appreciate this, but I have, like, an example of this, which was, like, when I wanted to learn how to do film photography. And in order to do that, I needed to go out and take photos, or, you know, build some time to go out and take photos. So I had to build in a routine, and this was back when I was working in FiDi downtown. I had to build it into my routine that, like, because I have work from like 9 to 5, and then like by that, like in the winter you have no daylight whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you can't, like, it's hard to take film photos when there's no sunlight. So I made it a point to build a routine where, you know, if there was still in the summer, like right when I get out from work, I would walk from FiDi all the way to Union Square and take photos all along the process. And in the winter, I would take my lunch break and like walk out and like take photos. But like if I didn't try and create that regular routine for myself, then I would have like never done it, or I never would have gotten it done. So I like building routines to get you to show up to like do the thing. But I mean, I also like spontaneity. It's like, yeah, the routine is there to just get you to show up, but then once you're like doing the thing, that's where like I like spontaneity and I like random stuff to happen. So I think the routine is there just, yeah, literally just to get you to practice the craft. And then yeah, but once the routine has got you to show up, what happens within that like time box is
it's like up to your like heart to like actually step in and do it.
Yeah. I actually think, like, now that I'm thinking about that time when I was learning film photography, that like goes back to the whole like imperfect thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So let me tell the story of like how I taught myself like how to do film photography. I basically bought a film camera.
Yeah.
And I literally did that. I built routines to say like, all right, I'm gonna like walk home from the office and I'm just gonna like snap. I don't care what the hell it is. I'm just gonna snap photos along the way. And like, of course, when you're just starting out, none of these are like award-winning photos or anything like that. But like, my goal wasn't to like take the best photo. It was to learn like how the lighting is and what I should set my aperture and shutter, like what the combination is, like the look that I'm looking for. And the only way for me to learn that is just to go out and snap a bunch of photos and then like look at the results and be like, hey, actually like this one was great. Like, so in every roll of film, I'd go out and take about like 60 photos, and if I were to get like one or two like really good photos in my eyes out of that, then I think that's pretty successful. But the culmination of like all of these like photo walks and stuff where I took a shit ton of photos and like there weren't that many great ones, like I don't know, well, you know that I did like 2 or 3 years ago, I did like an art gallery for my birthday.
Yeah.
I like made an entire wall of like a bunch of those photos that I took, and like I don't think any of them like deserve to be like on a gallery wall, but like I kind of worked towards that, where like I said like I'm gonna do this art show, and I'm gonna put a bunch of these like these photos that I took there, and like just that alone, like saying like that I'm gonna do that, and like I put a lot of those like not perfect things in there, like that was the motivation that I needed to go out there and just keep taking photos and actually learn like how aperture, shutter speed, and everything works. Like, yeah, my goal was to learn all that stuff, but the motivation was to say I'm renting out this gallery and I'm going to put a bunch of these photos
like
on there.
Like the pressure, the obligation was that
so that's like the routine, but what were the photos that came out of that, or what was the things that came out of that? I feel like that was the like abstract part of it.
Yeah, and I wanted to add like an addendum to the one painting that I ever finished, that like purple peony painting. I finished that like within the did I finish that no, I finished that before you and I met.
No, I only saw it when you got it back.
Yeah. So I had this one painting that I was working on for a few months, and in like the entire duration of my art life, right, which was like majority of my life, it's the only painting that I ever like looked at and was like, I'm done. It rejected anything I wanted to do after it. So I was like, all right, that's it, I'm done. That painting, I actually showed up as many days as I could for 2 hours each day. That painting, I was like, all right, you know what? Like, I really want to see what happens if I commit 2 hours a day to something. Because that was around the time I had that whole epiphany about like, okay, like, well, if, you know, you invest money, the whole like love, money, time thing, like, okay, well, if I invest money intentionally into something, then it's going to exponentially grow. And then if I invest love into something or someone, like, I've seen how they can exponentially grow. And in a lot of ways, if you invest in like time intentionally into something, it's going to exponentially grow, right? And I was like in this place where I'm like, oh wow, okay, I was thinking all year about time because somebody told me that I wasn't managing time well. I'm like, what's time? But once I kind of realized that, and I made the whole thing about like, all right, well, with money, I was able to live really comfortably with like my nonprofit salary because I started following that whole thing about pay yourself first, right? Like, as soon as you get a paycheck, put money aside into savings, pretend like you never made it, pay yourself first before you put money everywhere else. I'm like, all right. Then I had to look at like love, and I was like, okay, was I pouring like love into all these other places? Was I paying myself first with love? Was I investing love into myself the same way I was investing love into other people? I wasn't. So I was like, all right, I gotta figure out what it means to invest love into myself. And then I was like, I don't think I was giving myself any time. No time. I was working like extra full time. During my free time, I was like, just giving time to other people, like making time for parents, making time for friends. And then whenever I had time, I would just spend it on the internet. So I was like, what would it look like to give myself intentional time? And my experiment was the 2 hours a day that I spent painting. And that actually ended up culminating into the first finished product that I think I've ever made that I was really proud of, that somebody offered to buy from me because the way that they resonated with it. And I think, so for me, I think my motivation was actually like internal self-discovery, where I was like, well, what if I gave myself time first?
Yeah.
And I also learned a lot about myself by watching the way that I painted through that. So I'll add that addendum to say that I do think having a routine is extremely helpful for creative people, but it also sounds like you have to have a very intentional motivation for that routine. Just showing up can get really discouraging and like frustrating, right? Especially when you're like exhausted.
I mean, when you show up, you need to know what you're doing.
Like why you're there, right? Like I don't want to just show up for the sake of showing up because that gets really disheartening really fast.
Because it's like, I'm giving myself 2 hours, and then you show up like for the 2 hours, and it's like, all right, what do I do now?
Yeah. But I think for me, it was like, oh, let me just have this 2 hours to just actually like play, right? And I know that's kind of like the overarching topic that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like for me, a part of that routine actually needs to be not with this goal of doing something. I think I work better when I don't have a construct. I work better when I have like an overarching vision, but I just have to show up and like play in it. I know you talk about that all the time, and it actually kind of like whenever you talk about it, I end up going into this like hole of like philosophy, right? Or like socio-economic. I'm just like, but what if like play is a privilege? Like, you know what I mean? Like play is like a freaking privilege. Like this is if you really think about it, play is a privilege that people who don't need to worry about failure and survival.
Yeah. Like if people can't provide for their basic needs
or don't have a safe space to play, or if they fail at something while they're playing, then their family dies, right? Like, I remember when we first talked about it, and this actually came up when I was having that conversation with like my room of like women of color, where we were talking about imposter syndrome and how failure came up as just feeling so different for us, because a lot of the men that talk about you just have to like just try it and not be scared of failure, but we're like, what are you talking about? We didn't have that luxury, especially as children of immigrants. Like, people came here and they couldn't just like, oh, let me just see what happens if I, their play was a survival mechanism. It wasn't like,
I guess it depends what you're playing in. Yeah. If you're talking about painting.
Yeah.
Like, what's preventing you from play in painting?
Fear.
Like, if you get a painting wrong, you're not going to die, right?
I don't know. You don't know. Right. But that's what I mean, though. I think, the idea that play is safe and is, like, a place where you can actually learn stuff is something I think we had to, like, teach ourselves as adults in some ways. I might be like overgeneralizing something or making it like too woke, but that's kind of where my mind goes. Like, I had to sit there and wonder like what was my experience and relationship with play, and how come I have so much like anxiety around play, where you are just like play, you know, like you know, you had a room full of Legos growing up, where, you know, I wasn't allowed to bike past my block, you know, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like, so I've always been talking about like wanting to look at education and like educational methods, and one of the things that I've like convinced myself of as being like a crucial part of like a child's development, or like a child learning something, is like letting them play and like find the thing that they like when I think about growing up and like school, for me it was just kind of like, all right, here's school, you have to take like math, English, history, blah blah blah, and it's like you have to do these things, you have to pass these classes, and it's just like a lot of kids are confused as far as like what doing well in school means.
Right.
And it's like, oh, doing well in school means getting an A in like English, math, history, whatever. And when I was growing up, there's a lot of like really smart kids, but they just like hated doing homework, they were bad at tests, they were bad at whatever. But it's like, I don't think that when you're in like K to 12, like that's what school should be. School should be about learning. And I think the best way to learn stuff is to identify the things that you're just naturally motivated about. Like, there are some kids who are like really good at history, and there are some kids who are just really good and like enjoy doing math, and there are some kids who really like English and writing stuff. But the fact that you're like really good at one of those but then bad at everything else like doesn't mean that you're bad at school. So when it comes to like, to bring it back to play, like I feel like play is a way for you to identify like what you like and what you don't like, or what you're good at, and like kind of finding that Venn diagram of like, here's the things that I'm good at and here's the things that I'm interested in, and like this is what I should be doing. And if you don't create that room to play, then you won't identify what those things are. And yeah, it's just like, that's why I feel like, you know, it's always good to have sandboxes to allow you to play.
Sandbox, shout out to Startup, Korean drama that I just finished watching.
Yeah. So I feel
anyway.
like that's why I think play is super important, because it helps you identify, like, I think that your time is better spent like very quickly figuring out what are the things that I like doing and what are the things that I'm good at, versus like we're using that energy towards like, this is what I think I like society tells me that I should do in order to be successful. Like spending your time like doing that, like, oh, these are like, I should be a doctor, I should be whatever, because that's like what my parents say, or that's what makes a lot of money, and that's like I don't think that's gonna lead to like better learning or like a happier life.
It's gonna lead to better producing, but not like necessarily learning.
Yeah, like if you want to like find a fulfilling life, you want to find something that you both enjoy doing and will make you money and help you survive.
Yeah.
And without play or like building room to like just try a bunch of shit out and like fail at a lot of stuff, like without failing at 20 things, like you'll never get any closer to like, if you're working towards like, you know, you got one shot and it's got to be perfect.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn anything about, you know, I think the more you learn about the stuff that you don't like, the closer you'll get to finding out what you do like.
So is the happy medium, or like the balanced medium? Thanks, Belinda. Hi, Belinda. So would you say, because I think I'm seeing two kind of, you would almost think that they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, which is like a disciplined routine and play, right? So essentially what we said in the same conversation is you need a disciplined routine and you also need to play. And I think growing up, my high school experience was never about getting the A. Most of it was spent cutting class and playing.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, you know, sometimes people see play as the opposite of doing well, right? Or the opposite of having direction. So you know, even when I think about the sabbatical that I took from my career, where I took a year off to essentially rest and maybe perhaps play. Play was my word of the year in 2020 before like all the shit went down. But I felt so much anger at myself and like frustration and guilt because I felt like I wasn't being disciplined enough and I wasn't producing enough and I wasn't like doing anything. But I'm kind of feeling a little bit of compassion in having taken that time off to like play with what feels right and play with what like makes me inspired and play with a lot of different ways of expressing what I like, connecting with the communities I wanted to connect with and doing the work I wanted to do. In talking about routine, do you think it makes sense to then recommend that maybe what might be helpful is creating a disciplined routine around play? So giving yourself like 2 hours a day to just play.
Yeah. So the routine I see is just like guardrails.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the gutter rails and
play
bowling.
is fine if you like know like what. Yeah. Like if you set boundaries to it. If you just if there's no guardrails to play, then it's just like, all right, you're just kind of blindly just doing whatever, but you're like not even.
It's play without a goal.
You're not checking in constantly to say like, all right, I've done a lot of this play. Like now, do I know that I'm closer to anything?
Yeah.
If you don't do that, then the play is just kind of.
So is it play with a goal, or like what is intentional play, right? Like what does that mean?
I think you need to go into it
like into
like you need to go into play like kind of already knowing what do I want to get out of this, right? So before I started, so the whole photography thing, like I needed to identify that I want, or maybe I needed to identify that I wanted to pursue photography. I didn't know whether or not I would like it, but that was like one of the things that I wanted to figure out in doing this and showing up every single day and like playing in photography. It was like, all right, I'm just gonna like go into it and do whatever, and like I'm gonna just try doing these things and I'm gonna like it, or I won't. Like that was one of the things I wanted to find out in like playing with photography. But yeah, I think you need to go into it like with some sort of
like a small goal.
Yeah,
right?
But not a goal of saying
I'm gonna be good at it.
I need to produce a perfect thing at the end of this. No, the goal is like I need to figure out if I'm like interested in this. I need to like.
So a non-production goal.
Yeah.
A like outcome related goal, but more like a growth related goal.
Could be like learning something new. It's like, oh, now I know.
Or like a product related goal, I guess.
Yeah, you don't need like a physical thing at the end of it to say that like this is the goal. The goal for me for a lot of stuff is just like, did I learn like something? Did I learn how this works?
Yeah.
Did I learn anything about myself in doing this?
I remember because the whole thing about being that like the writer thing, where it's like if your goal when you sit down to work is to produce even one beautiful sentence, you will fail every time and you will not want to show up to work. I was gonna say something else, I lost it. Oh, do you remember in the fall of last year when I was like, I'm gonna force myself to paint for 5 days this week?
Yeah.
And by the third day I was like, don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Don't want to do it. Hate it. Can't stand it. And it was only 2 hours, but I was like so resistant to it and I was like exhausted.
Yeah.
So basically what James did was I like ate dinner, and then when I went to the bathroom, he like set up my easel for me, set up my paint, and was like, listen, all you have to do is show up. And one of the tips that I received that day was like, even if all you do is look at it, and you just identify what you like. I might not pick up a brush, but I can identify parts. If I don't feel ready, right? Like I might not be confident enough that day to lay down a single brush stroke, because with acrylic, it's permanent, right? But I can stare at something within the comfort of my confidence and be like, okay, I think I want more balance here, and I think I want less color here. That painting, by the way, I still, every time I work on that background, I just paint over it every time.
To use that as an example, though, so when you said that you wanted to do 5 days of painting, like what was your goal? Was your goal to finish that specific painting, or like...
My goal was to show up. My goal was to force myself to show up. And I think I ended up getting really comfortably sidetracked in the I need to make something nice every time. I need to be satisfied at the end of my 2 hours, because I just get really frustrated if I'm not satisfied and I feel like I've wasted my time and I failed if I don't have something satisfying at the end.
But if your goal was to show up, like, did you have to work on that specific piece every single time you showed up? Or like could you have like had a blank canvas and said, all right, I'm here, like let me paint whatever I want on this?
At the time, I just, okay, all right? At the time, that was the one thing I wanted to show up to. Because I think, like, for me, I think a long-term goal for me is I start new paintings all the time. Like, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna start this thing. But my lifelong challenge has been finishing a painting because I never know when something's done. Or I get so discouraged along the way. I know I'm a talented artist. I know that I have skills, but I get so mad and just like super resistant along the way that I won't pick it up. Yeah. Even if I'm like, yeah, my goal, I'll wake up in the morning, I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to paint today. That's it. That's like, I have 3 things I want to do today, and painting is one of them. The 2-hour slot, I would avoid it. My brain is like, I'm not ready, you know?
Would you, so for that painting to be done, we're back to that again. Like, well, how would you know that that painting is done? Is that it's at a place where it's like so close to the photo, or is it like?
I think I actually need to figure out what that means, because I think for me it's more of like an internal sense of balance. Like, I know when something is done when I feel like the composition and the colors are all balanced enough that it feels strong but not like competitive within itself, right? Like, I don't necessarily know how to quantify that or how to put that into a like a rubric kind of thing.
Yeah.
I adjust things over and over again until I'm just like, oh, you know, this is it.
Yeah.
But I don't, you know, I think the downside of cutting all my classes when I went to art school was that I don't know if it's because I don't have like formal training in something like color theory or whatever. Like, I just go with my feelings, and then my feelings are never clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking about a bunch of things and going into this like definition of like what is done. I was thinking about like, so there was a time when I wrote a book and I'm like,
James wrote a book.
I published a book and I'm actually like not happy with it.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where like I was getting in this hole of like trying to make it so perfect, and then I just got so mad that like it wasn't at the way it was, that I just decided that like, all right, like I just need to finish this book. But finishing a book to me was like, does it have an intro, a body, and a conclusion?
That's
and is there
it?
stuff written? And then that's it. I think, you know, when I look back at it, it's like not a book that I would like talk up and recommend and share with people, because it's like kind of bare. But like to me, when I was like, all right, I just need to get this out the door, it was like, all right, it just needs to have like an intro, like a body, and a conclusion, and ship it. I almost think about like with your paintings that you get frustrated with, like, I don't know, and I've seen paintings where people like have a pencil outline with just like one brush stroke, and it's not even like completely filled in, and it's
$3,000.
Yeah, like so
masterful.
It's about one of those things where it's like, if I get so frustrated with a project, and it's like, all right, I'd rather have this thing done than just be like sit here incomplete and finished. And it's like, all right, I just need to fill in all the lines and then like put a couple details in. It's not like fully, but it's done, and I'm just gonna like stow this away and like not think about it again. Some people are okay with like a work in progress, just saying like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm not gonna like lay another like piece of ink down on it. I'm just gonna like stow it away and move on to the next thing. I think the thing that becomes difficult is that, or the thing that becomes overwhelming, is if you have a million things that you like didn't finish, but they're just sitting there in the back of your head that like, oh, I didn't finish this, I didn't finish that, I didn't finish this. It's like, if there's a way that you could get some closure with yourself for each one of those individual things, to say like, all right, this thing is done, I could stow it away and I don't have to think about it again, I can move on to the next thing. I think sometimes if you have a lot of unfinished stuff and you're still thinking about it, it's like you're carrying a lot of baggage. It's
literal baggage.
Into the next thing that you create. And then the next thing you create, you're not giving your full undivided attention. So I don't know, just something to think about.
I'm feeling really like vulnerable right now and like going into like a really like deeply personal self-reflective space, which is why my arms are crossed and I'm not looking at you. And
everybody could see that because we're on a live stream.
Our body language. But I think this is really interesting, and I think I want to reflect a little bit on all the ways I think I've just kind of carried unfinished business, unfinished work into every year, because I think about the weight that I think that I've been carrying for so many decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
And before, when I didn't care about outcomes, it's like whatever happens will happen. Like, if friends will come and go, like jobs will come and go, like, you know, whatever's meant to be in my life will just be here right now, and then whatever needs to go will go. Once I became about like, I need to finish every single thing I touch, and I want to commit and invest in every single thing, like, I developed like a certain level of, you know, anxiety around completion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really interesting, because as a creative and as an entrepreneur, that is really something I have to figure out.
Yeah.
I think this is really big, and I'm gonna like journal about it later.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think this is really really.
Yeah. What does it take to finish those things? Like, when it comes to my book, in order to finish that, I needed to like get content for like the things that I said in my outline that I was going to write about. I may not have touched everything that I wanted to in my head, but you know, all right, this is the outline that I submitted. Everything has some content in it. I went to an editor, the editor approved, like that, like just to get through those steps, like that's for me, like that made it done. And although it's not like the perfect book, or it's not even a book that I would recommend now, because like it's only like the surface of what I actually wanted to touch on, and it's not like the perfect thing, like I don't know, at least I was able to finish that and call it done, and like I've now moved on from it.
And you're now a published writer.
I think things would be way different if I just abandoned the project and like ghosted them and said that like I can't do this anymore, like I'm like frustrated and I can't finish. Like I think I'd be in like a much different place now. Like that would always be on my conscience, right? I'm like, wow, remember that time I like didn't finish that thing? Like I finished it and I know exactly what's wrong with it, but like that makes me like really okay with that, and it's not like weighing down on everything that I do moving forward.
Yeah, I'm like, remember that time that I was going to write a thesis in college about identity and how your narrative defines your identity, and I got so overwhelmed that I was like, I'm not going to write this thesis. I've had the opposite experience where I was like ready, I was on board, but I decided to step away from that because I was like, not going to do it.
So Deshaun says, the experience from your unfinished work can contribute to your completed work. Yeah, that's totally true.
I guess. But I just need to know, I just have to understand what I think. Am I putting too much out there? Do I need to stop?
No.
I think like, I feel like I would better understand what all of this is for, what all that like unfinished work is for, when I can clarify what I want my completed work to look like. You know, like, all right, so for example, with like Back to Self, right? Like my career, like a lot of my nonprofit work, like my 15 years of like just floating around this nonprofit world, kind of going with my gut. I'm like, all right, like I'm gonna take this job because it feels good. Like that's basically what I did. And when I tried to create my resume, I felt like I only had this piecemeal resume that had no complete story to it. But then once I was like, okay, once I recognized that Back to Self was like what I wanted to do, all that made sense. All that work, that meandering work, just combined to make me really good at what I do with Back to Self. I don't think if I hadn't sat down and asked myself, like, what do you want? Like, how do you want to engage with people? What's the one small thing that I can do for everyone I talk to? Which is to, like, nudge them back to themselves a little bit more. If that's the one thing I can do in every conversation that I have, then I have lived a fulfilled and purposeful life, right? But I agree with you, Deshaun, in that sense that I feel all of my unfinished work is contributing to the complete work of my life cycle now. Yeah.
I think a lot of, that's totally true. And I think that, a lot of your previous things led you to Back to Self, or creating Back to Self. And I don't think you'd be clear on like what you wanted to do with or as clear as you are now with what you wanted to do with Back to Self if you didn't have all those like previous
unfinished
experiences, unfinished, or
Yeah.
what experiences you may have considered failures. Like, those weren't failures if all of that stuff is contributing to
Yeah.
like clarifying what you want to do with Back to Self.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe you don't even know whether or not Back to Self is what you'll be doing now, but what you will be doing in the future, Back to Self is going to be a significant
scaffolded.
piece of like where you land with that.
And I think when I think about creativity, I remember getting really excited about the Korean calligraphy because there's a part of me that was like, I think once I learn this, I will unlock something really important. I think I would be able to bring together a lot of the work that I've done into this specific style of painting. I just need to figure out what it actually means to start, and I need to figure out what it means to finish in a way that's like a different definition from all the like, because the definition that I've been carrying around painting has clearly not worked for me. I've never finished, right? And Sandy, it does shame me. It really does. I don't recognize that I'm ashamed of it until I start talking to people about it.
Yeah.
And damn.
So
Yeah, guys, this is getting deep. Like,
I was thinking, like, if I'm like a very mathematical and methodical person.
It's kind of hot. It's very into it.
If I were to say today that I wanted to like become a painter or like learn painting,
So when you're like, you're gonna make beats?
No.
Tell me more.
Well, so if I were to like say that, all right, today or like in 2021, I want to like learn painting and become a painter. The way that I would go about it is, so there's in like tech and startup culture, like there's a phrase that says like fail fast and fail often. So if I were to like navigate painting and like find my own style as a painter, the way that I would approach it is I'd like look at every like painting style or every like medium and just try every one of them like as quickly as possible and fail at every one of them like as quickly as possible to eventually land on like, oh, what is the medium that I like using, what is the style that I gravitate towards doing naturally, what is like, do I like creating people or landscapes or whatever. Like the only way, the way to get to that quickest is to literally like try everything and fail at everything and start, realizing through all those failures, all right, building up towards like, all right, I know I hate all this stuff, but these things are okay. All right, now I tried all these things, now these things are okay. And you're eventually building into like, all right, I know like what style I like what medium that I know what medium I like working in. I know like whatever, and like that'll ultimately land you into like becoming whatever, or you might, through that process I might realize that I hate painting and I like hate all this stuff, so I'm just gonna try something else.
That's really interesting because I think I've always kind of had the opposite mindset where I recognize how much resources actually goes into being able to fail fast and fail often. So I usually take a really calculated risk, like not a risk. I take very calculated steps in what I'm going to invest in, because art, as I learned in high school, is a very expensive hobby. Like, all right, yeah, I said it, and then like people started sending me videos of like dudes out there painting with their flip-flops. Like, okay, all right, like I get it, but like I think for me, I've embedded this like scarcity mindset into myself where I'm just like, okay, well, if I want to experiment with this medium, I have to buy like canvas, like this many paintbrushes, paints, and then before you know it, like one trip to the art store for one canvas, 3 bottles of paint, 1 brush is $90, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to invest very carefully. The only reason I was able to play around with gouache is because, not the only reason, but I, bought like a set on sale. I'm like, great. And then I had friends who bought me that set on my birthday. So I'm like, okay, now I have like wastable, right? Expendable resources where I can play. Film costs money, right? So you have to be comfortable with wasting film in order to play. Where from like I grew up broke, my family grew up broke mindset, it's one of those things where I'm just like, every single thing of film is precious, so I have to be like good in order to waste it. I think like that's just kind of, I'm not necessarily saying that to like validate it, but I'm just recognizing that that's like this narrative that comes up when I think about failing fast and failing often, and how my like very like shrewd way it kind of ties into it.
I think if you let that become like an obstacle, then
I won't go nowhere.
You're not even gonna try.
I'm never gonna go anywhere.
If that's like your like the thing you're using, then you're not even gonna try with the stuff that you can afford.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I would discourage you from thinking in that way, because literally, people showed you videos of a person
painting
using
with
flip-flops,
flip-flops.
but it's like, what, you do have paints right now.
Right.
So like,
I
why
do.
not like play around within that?
Yeah.
Of like,
yeah.
all right, you have this medium. All right, now you could try different styles with that. Like,
yeah. I just want to like acknowledge that that's a thought process that I and other people would have when it comes to just being like, let's just fucking do it. Like somebody's just like, well, if you want to do something, just do it. And it's like, it's just a very interesting thought process that appeared in this moment.
Yeah.
Ooh, is it a waste if it makes you better?
No, that's like my philosophy in all the imperfect stuff that I create, because the point of all the unfinished work and stuff is to learn and to become better.
Yeah, and I have, when I'm in like this kind of frame of conversation, so my therapist also brought up the whole thing about the word choices, where even the word failure, if you have a conflicting relationship with the word failure, to say like, okay, well, I just need to like fail gently or fail fast or fail often, or even like take safe risks, right? There's still, even though consciously I'm like, it's a safe space, unconsciously my fear is going to be like, bitch, what the fuck? So she was like, well, what if you use a different word instead? And that's where actually the word play came back into my vocabulary, where she was like, what if instead of, taking risks, you play, right? Because play is essentially failing at stuff but having fun while you're doing it.
Yeah.
And then she was like, what if instead of confronting something, you say the word like invite? And then the conversation that I ended up having with a bunch of like my colleagues around that fear of failure was also, instead of me being productive, I'm investing in myself. So even if I like show up for 2 hours and all I do in those 2 hours is I make a list to make tomorrow easier, I showed up and I invested in myself. So I have to be compassionate about the time that I spent.
Yeah.
So that question, it's like, is it a waste of time if it makes you better? I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, before you, like, I think I've said this in many different ways, in different words, but I think before you play, before you do anything, it's like literally like sitting down and saying like, all right, what are my metrics for success? Like, what am I trying to get out of this
metrics?
process?
I live my life based on feelings. God.
So like when you show up for your 2 hours every single day, like being clear with yourself about like, what is going to make this
objective?
Successful?
Yeah.
And if you start off, before you begin the 2 hours and you say like, in order to be successful, I need to finish this painting, then you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure, right? And failure, so the word failure is based off of like what you set out in the beginning.
It's subjective. It's
based off of what you say is your metric for success. Like if you didn't meet what you said in the beginning that you were going to like get out of this, then it's a failure, right? So if I went into the 2 hours of painting and I said that, I'm gonna sit down for 5 days for 2 hours each day, and at the end of this I want like a finished, completed work of art, like you're kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Or really, like I'm going to show up every day for 5 days, and at the end of the day I want to feel good about what I did. That's a fuzzy objective.
Too. Yeah. But if you said I'm going to like show up every day and I'm just going to like, build my skills and like my technique and like putting paint down on the thing, that'll define whether or not you're
like going back to like
failing.
SMART goals, like small, like
attainable
attainable.
Goals. Like
what is
I'm
it?
not going to be like
specific, attainable, no, measurable, attainable, or relatable and time bound or something. I don't know.
I'm not going to go into saying that I want to become a painter and sell a work of art in an auction for like $1 million, because that's like unattainable, right?
Yeah.
Just being clear with yourself before you go into anything, like what is it that I'm trying to get out of this, and then saying like, all right, this is what I want to get out of this, all right, now go.
What's like my play goal? And I have to make it like because going back to
the guardrails.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Or what's the sand? Like, what are the boundaries of the sandbox?
Like, what do I want to play in today? Like, I just want to understand what it means to pack sand on top of each other rather than build a masterful sandcastle. I need to like look at the element of sand.
I need to know how much water I need to add to sand to make it pliable enough to like build a castle.
Okay.
Like focusing on that, then like the actual thing that you're creating will help you create better sandcastles. Like you literally sat there and like you probably failed a bunch. I added too much water this time. The whole thing fell apart.
Yeah.
Oh damn, like I didn't have enough water. Like it just blew away in the wind.
Yeah.
But
so that's
like,
a water thing. That's not a me thing.
I mean, you're building your technique, like focusing on that versus like, I'm going to build a perfect sandcastle. It's like, no, this is like, you actually learned this thing, which helps get you to building a perfect sandcastle.
I'm going to do a time check. It's 8:25. And I also did not think this was going to be like an unpacking Jess's whole life story and call me out and be seen situation, but it turned out pretty deep, and I have some like thinking to do tonight. I do want to say with the 5 minutes that we have left, one, is there anybody? I love you guys. Thank you. I do, if you want to ask anything or say anything, feel free to, let us know now. We can like riff off of that. Or I know that we wanted to talk a little bit about 2021, but we can also just make that like the next topic, which I think is going to be kind of related.
Well, we touched on my 2021.
Yeah, you talked a lot, dude. Like, I thought this was James and Jess, not James and James.
Well, so we talked about my 2021 goals, and then we had a creative therapy session.
No, it's true. It's very, I feel very, like, exposed, so I need to, like, close up. So I need to like ground myself. So yeah, I guess we can kind of go lightly into saying what we want to play more with in 2021, like what play might look for us in 2021.
5-minute unwind
detox,
and then like, maybe if anybody has any questions,
at
least 5 minutes to let them ask anything that's kind of lingering.
Yeah, like my shoulders are all hunched up.
Although people were asking stuff in our answer.
Yeah, you guys asked really deep questions. This is like beautiful. So what do you think your definition of play?
Well, 2021 play is like figuring out what I could sell.
That doesn't sound play.
Well, you'll see how it's play.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm really playing around with here in the studio and then trying to like sell it and then figure out, people actually want to buy this.
Oh, like experimenting with what like sells and what.
Yeah. So for example, like I just, over the past month, I've collected so many of these freaking magazines.
He has like a wall of magazines right now.
So many freaking magazines. But like I was gonna like create some collaging elements and stuff like that and scan them and then try to sell them as like design assets.
Don't give your ideas away.
That's fine. There's a lot of other people doing that. But I wanted to play around with that to see if like that's something that I like doing. Don't worry, a lot of people do this already. I'm just figuring out whether or not it's something that like I like doing or can do. So that's like one thing I'm gonna play around with. There was like played around with like long exposure photography with like the foil.
You should talk to Deshaun about that.
Yeah, so I made all these like little foil light streak things that like, people could download and use as like design assets. So there's like a bunch of little things around that with like photography, video, that I'm going to be doing in the studio that I'm going to be playing around with and seeing if I could sell them or if there's an appetite for people to buy the stuff that I create versus like what's already out there. Because like I said, like these things aren't new.
Yeah.
There's already like on Creative Market and stuff, there's a lot of other people selling things that are very similar to this. Or, in the process of trying all these things out, I might find something that nobody else is doing right now that I could do. But it just takes the act of like, not copying, like actually going through the process of trying to do what other people are doing to figure out what
you're systematically going through the processes.
Exactly, like I told you, I'm going through all of the styles to figure out like what I'm going to try and copy every style until I figure out, all right, this is actually what I want to do. So that's kind of my play experiment for 2021 is to try all these things that I see that other people are selling.
Yeah.
Try doing it myself from scratch. And then I'm hoping through that process of trying all those different things out, I might find something that I could make money on selling as design assets or whatever that like isn't out there currently, but I'm hoping to figure out what that is by doing what is already out there. So yeah, there you go.
Cool. Very inspiring. And I'd say for me, my definition, my play for 2021 might have to actually get a little bit more grassroots. And like, because the past year, I think or the past few months, I've really tapped back into a place of like productivity and that word alone, but like a motivated space, let's say, in terms of showing up for work, for back to self stuff, and like putting frameworks in place and like putting goals and campaigns in place and really like hyping myself up to start putting myself out there. And I think for me, play for 2021 would have to be, one, redefining my relationship with play and like just completely overhauling my relationship with failure. And two, to start putting actual stuff out there, regardless of how people respond or whether or not I feel ready. Like, I just have to put stuff out there and see what sticks for me, not for other people, but for me.
Yeah.
And not get so paralyzed with like needing to know what I'm doing before I do it. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, 2021 would be my first step into play.
Yeah.
How will you celebrate New Year's and kick off 2021? Well, New Year's is our anniversary. Mm-hmm. I met him on January 1st, 2 years ago. So I don't know what we're doing the day of. We're probably just gonna, I don't know what we're doing the day of.
I don't know. And it's New Year's is very interesting.
Yeah.
I guess it's just stay at home and open up a bottle of champagne, and then that's it.
You want to get all your friends together on PlayStation and have a PlayStation New Year's?
Have a Zoom New Year's?
No Zoom. No, I'd rather not Zoom, but maybe everybody can just do a gamer's New Year's, and then all play something together, which would be cute, and then we can all like game kiss. Okay.
If you're like an Animal Crossing or something,
Animal
your
Crossing.
characters could kiss.
Well, you need Switch for that. Not everybody has Switch. That's just been sold out.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah.
And then on the day after New Year's, we're actually gonna do. I think
this is why I was laughing.
Yeah, because I'm like a little embarrassed about it, and like James is really excited about it, but I'm like low key very. I think it's really nerdy. So whatever. But okay, I'll just. I think
the people that I've told have been like, "Wow, that's smart."
Okay, that's good. So basically, we're gonna do a. You know how companies do these like company retreats or like company offsites where they like get together and like all of the staff or the major
talk about
stakeholders, talk about company goals and like this past year's challenges and stuff like that, and make sure that all the goals align and everyone's like heard. And
philosophically, the best way to do that is to be out of the office and somewhere else so that you're not distracted by.
Or it's like not easy to walk away. You just like put yourself in a bubble and then you create really safe, neutral ways to talk about goals. Mm-hmm. So I asked James if he'd be willing to do that as a couple, and so we're gonna do like a couple offsite, like a couple retreat where I have an agenda.
So we rented out a nice Airbnb,
like small Airbnb in Pennsylvania somewhere.
Shh, don't tell people.
Oh, that's in
that's not in
the city.
We're gonna be there for a few days, and then we're going to have a couple offsite.
Yeah. So, I like ask, there's going to be like a few categories that we're going to agree to prioritize the couple of days before, and then and then James is going to come up with like fun things that we can do in case things get tense. So that we can trust falls and stuff, and we're going to have like post-its and like make a fucking PDF about it. I don't know. So like this is our first time. I don't really know what, but we're both pretty excited about it because I think we're both like pretty analytical when it comes to like goals and feelings, and at least I'm pretty analytical about feelings, and you're analytical about like long-term goals in general.
About everything.
So so I think it would be a good way to kind of like combine forces and start the new year on a very planned note. So yeah, that's our goal. Yeah.
With a postmortem.
Postmortem.
Do you call it? I've called it postmortems, and people.
I don't know what a postmortem is. Yeah, I thought it was like post-death or something, right?
Yeah.
What?
Well, postmortem literally
means post-death, like tombstone, like postmortem.
I need to just put a sun in it.
Yeah, but what does postmortem mean? Because I think I use a different word.
Postmortem is just, all right, after a project is complete, you talk about, all right, what happened.
I just call it a debrief.
Wrong, what was successful, what wasn't successful, what do we do next time to
it's you know, it's literally just called a debrief.
So after the project is dead, you talk about how it went.
No, I don't like that. So that's it. I think we can wrap up because it's been an hour and a half.
Alrighty, thank you all.
You guys!
For those who showed up and
thanks for joining.
Showed up for us.
Yeah.
Of course, this is going to be on our YouTube channel. We'll just save it. But I feel like, we could always take the audio recordings of these and just, publish it as a podcast or something.
Let's play with that idea.
So maybe if people share these out with other people, more people will tune in.
Yeah. Yeah. This got deep. Thanks, guys. This was really fun.
All right. So this is just James and Jess signing off. We'll see you in our next live stream. We'll announce it a few days before again. But thanks, guys.
Bye.